Everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Indy Investor Pod. And we have the Melissa Asbury on here with us again for another episode. She's coming back, and coolest thing ever, right in between, we're taking a break and just kind of catching up on our notes of what we want to talk about in the next episode. And Melissa sold a house like during the break of these two episodes. So congratulations, awesome stuff there. What made this such a great deal? What's going on with this one?
So this is just so crazy. Like, God is so good. So yeah, in between these two episodes, I'm like, hold on, Brian, let me check my phone because I can hear it just going crazy over here. And I see the message, we'll take the deal. We love it. It's a go. So see,
good stuff.
Most impactful here, but you're like delegating things elsewhere to get things done.
There you
go.
We're
going to talk about.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. I know one of the things that you mentioned on the last episode when we were talking, you mentioned that, sometimes it's just like, we talked about like, oh yes, every investor, they're like, oh man, if I only would have held on to that, or if I, kind of knowing what you want to do with deals and stuff like that. But you mentioned too, of like, sometimes like you haven't been wholesaling as much, or haven't been flipping as much, and you've been doing more holds right now and things. Yeah. I work with this all the time with clients, especially people that do want to hold properties and hold as much as they can, of basically just kind of knowing your numbers, knowing your metrics, and knowing where you stand with cash, of like, how much cash do I have? How much cash do I need to really reach my goals this quarter, this year, or whatever it is? Even though you're maybe if your end goal is, hey, I want to hold as many properties as I can, sometimes it may call for, hey, this is a great hold property, but you need to wholesale it now, or you need to flip it now, because sometimes you just need the cash. And I know as you're we've talked before about you kind of having different exit strategies and things like that, and analyzing deals and stuff. So when do you know that? How do you do a good job of kind of knowing, I guess, your cash position of like, hey, no, this would be a great hold, but no, I'm going to need to wholesale this one. I need to flip this one. Like, how do you decide that?
So before we talk about like each individual property, I think that person needs to know what their end goal is in mind. And also like your risk for a personality profile. Like we all have a certain risk level that we're comfortable with. With my own home and my family, my risk level is low. But with real estate investing, I'm willing to risk a little bit more. So my goal is to build passive income to be able to one day have the luxury of being a full-time mom, right? And wife. So when that will happen, I don't know. But right now I'm just learning a lot and enjoying the ride. So this last year we did buy and hold a lot, and that was to offset our gains with depreciation, right? So I wanted to be able to depreciate more assets. I also saw what happened in 2020 and 2021, like appreciation, it's going through the roof. So I'm like, if I would have kept what I had in 2019, where would I be now? I don't think the market, and I'm no expert, but I don't think it's going to go down. Supply and demand, right? Demand is very high. Supply is very low. Builders have never been busier. So the prices are just going to keep going up, and take advantage of these interest rates. So yes, I was holding a lot, but now I know we need to have a greater cash position because we do want to do Airbnbs. And the flip market is so hot that, I've learned a couple of things in this program. It's called Flip Me. It's with Pace Morby and Jamil DMG. And it's like the littlest things that you can do to really put your property on a different level compared to others, where you can push those comps up. That's something that I was not doing last year. I was pricing it very safe to try to get a lot of people in, but it's like, no, if we do a design feature wall, or if we do an amazing backyard or an oasis, or create other spaces within that home that aren't in other comparable comps within a mile away, you can get an extra $10,000 or $20,000 for that property. And those were things I was not pushing the envelope on. So I'm looking forward to doing that this year.
Yeah. I love that philosophy too. I'm always looking at whatever we're doing. I always want to look at also whatever the competition's doing. And then I'm either going to make that decision of like, hey, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it better, or I'm going to pivot. I'm going to do the exact opposite of them. You're looking in these neighborhoods of like, hey, what are all these houses look like? What don't they have? Oh, I can make an awesome one of these and really kind of bring some value to this property that nobody else is going to have here and stuff like that. And I think you do a great job with that. What's your favorite project that you've done, or what's your favorite like feature that you ever brought into a house? It's like, oh man, this is so cool.
Yeah. So our
I
features.
know you might, the political, maybe you're like, oh, they're all great and they're all wonderful and I love them all. Like,
So
what's the
lately,
best one, miss? Come on.
so lately I don't feel like we've been doing beautiful projects because I've just been trying to rehab rental properties, right? So like you don't want to make that super nice. You can't put too much money in there. You got to get your return on investment. But in our flips, there is a Carmel townhome that we did that was absolutely beautiful. It had the woodwork, the trim work. We just gave it a fresh coat of paint, replaced the carpeting. Instead of just putting in like cheap, trashy carpet, we put in like a beautiful design pattern carpet. And we staged that thing to the nines. It was like very black, very white, very crisp and a little bit more modern. And that was so fun. And
Yeah.
that got a ton of positive reviews. So that one got us a lot of traction. But then also one thing that Ben and I love to do is that for like some of these older kitchens that are worn down, whether it just be like a plain oak wood or a pine, we love to obviously paint that, save whatever you can. I think of myself as kind of like the no demo reno girl. You know what
There
I'm
you
talking
go.
about?
I like
Yes.
that.
So try to salvage everything you have, but just give it a good facelift. Take your cabinetry from floor to ceiling, right? Because so often there's that gap between the top of the cabinets and the ceiling. You're like, what are you doing here? Like, why didn't they finish that?
Yeah.
So we like to add like a beautiful header, beef it up with some extra trim. This is where Ben comes in. Paint it a beautiful like is it navy hail or a Kendall charcoal color? Add some brass hardware that you can get for super cost effective off of like Etsy, which I
Yeah.
love. Um, and then it looks awesome. It looks amazing at like a $250,000-$300,000 price point.
Yeah. And I think it's so cool. You brought up just a
Yeah.
really good point there. Just a nice little tip of for some of those, just like some of the hardware features or anything like that. Like instead of just going to the Lowe's or Menards or Home Depot, like they have great stuff. Like that's fine and stuff. But can you just go on and just search on whether it's on, on
Amazon.
Etsy or something like that? Just find something unique and something that's going to bring something
Different.
just a little different. I love it. So
Yeah. So true. Hmm.
I think you brought up a really good point. A little bit ago, you're talking about the market of, hey, you don't see it slowing down anytime soon. Like builders are building more than ever. Just the supply and the demand, it's there and stuff. And that's kind of always the hot topic. It's been the hot topic for the last 2 years of like, oh, when is the market going to drop? When is it going to shift? Like, it's not going to happen this year. It's not going to happen in 2022. And granted, I'll knock on wood as I'm saying that. We never know when
Yeah.
another thing's going to happen or whatever. But I just see, as far as especially Indianapolis, like a market like this, is there are more people that are investing. And it's not even just the homeowners of how, the market is so great for homeowners and things like that right now, but also just the investors. There's more people that are buying investment properties or just buying properties in general more than ever before, because there is that person that they watch HGTV and they want to try to flip, or
Yep.
you got hedge funds out there that
Hedge
are just buying
funds.
properties and like crazy right now. Just there are so many people that want to buy properties, need to buy properties for whatever they're doing. And Indianapolis is that perfect fit for
Yeah.
everybody of what they want to do. It's like you said, I don't see it slowing down.
I
It's not
agree.
going to happen this year.
Like I look at how I used to invest, which was the stock market, and it's so shaky lately, right?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
getting into we're definitely in Q1 of 2022, and it's so shaky. It's not growing the way that it was. And so people are moving and pivoting their money in real estate so I have a deal right now. I think people are a little bit nervous because it's outside of Indianapolis, but you can get a 20% cash on cash return in some of these outlying cities
Yeah.
because the properties are so cheap. And guess what, guys? Like people can't afford to buy a new home, right? Because they can't compete. They can't put in over asking bids and offers because they don't have the extra 10 grand sitting around. So guess what? They have to rent.
Yeah.
And so rental rates are going up. It's such a perfect storm for investors if you know what you're doing and you know how to underwrite and you're
Yeah.
learning from people like you.
Yeah. And there's some great, also, Indianapolis is a great market in general, but there's also some great secondary and tertiary markets here in the state. Like people are doing great things in Terre Haute right now. I think people are doing some great investments in Kokomo and things like that, like Marion, even. Like there's some good opportunities out there and stuff, and let alone going like all the way down to Bloomington or South Bend or things like that. There's some good
Yeah.
stuff throughout the state too, that you can get some, you can get the $30,000 deals, $40,000 deals and still be pretty successul with them.
Yeah,
So yeah.
absolutely. I'm
So
glad you said that.
yeah. So I know you mentioned on the last show too, and I kind of wanted to save this because I know this might be a little bit bigger chunk or anything, but working with contractors, always tricky, always a tough thing and stuff like that. So what are some tips that you have for people when it comes to, hey, finding contractors, working with contractors, building a relationship with them and kind of working on those projects and stuff like that, especially when you
Yeah.
know that like you have a husband who'd be like, oh man, he can do this way better than this, or I can rely on him and things. But he's not gonna be able to do all your projects. He's got a life too, and he's working and he's
It's our
busy and stuff.
sanity.
So yeah, how do you go about, like, what's some advice you have for just working with contractors, building relationships with them, and then trusting them too?
Yeah. Number one, treat them right.
Yeah.
Don't nickel and dime them. Like, they're trying to work hard too. They're trying to do favors for you. They're also getting 3 or 4 other phone calls in that day to pull them away from your job. So treat them right, pay them quickly, and give them respect. So do things that maybe go above and beyond, deliver things to the job site, tell them, "Hey, I so appreciate you doing this," or, "Hey, it really meant a lot that you got that done on time," or, "Hey, thank you again for going to pick up that extra wood," whatever it might be. Just always fill their cup in whatever ways they need to be,
Yeah.
okay? I think that's kind of common sense. Treat people with respect, but so many times people don't.
Yeah.
So that's tip number one. Number two, you need to go to the job sites often.
Yeah.
Often.
Yeah.
So we have an amazing contractor. His name's Miguel. He's kind of a one-stop shop. He does it all, but he's very busy. So I'm like, I need a secondary guy. We've found one and he's been good, but unfortunately, after 3 or 4 houses this last year, he's been cutting corners. And so I've realized before he goes on to the next step, like let's say he's finishing a certain part of the floor, I will take a video. I will go through the phone, the home. I'll take a video. I'll say, "Hey, listen, these are the things that need to be addressed." I'll send him that video, and then the next day or 48 hours later, I'll go back to make sure it's done. Well, he's trying to speed up the project because he wants to get on to the next house. So I'll never forget, this just happened like a month ago. I said, "Hey, that carpet shouldn't be down yet." Like, we didn't talk about those holes because there were rodents coming into the house from all of these gaps in the subfloor. Well, guess what? They were never patched up.
Yeah.
I had been drive over there, which he was at another property 20 minutes away. He's like, "Hey, my wife just wants to double check to make sure before we finish putting down this carpet. Can we pull this up?" And he's like, "Oh, no, 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 it's good." Pulled it up and it wasn't good. I was like, I don't lose my cool often, but I'm just like, dude, this is again cutting corners. We're paying you. I'm not paying you like 70% or 80% to get the job done. I'm paying you 100% and I expect 100% of the job to be done right.
Yeah.
So you gotta just make good relationships and trust people. And when you can't trust them, then you have to go in another direction,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, which is tough. And that, one of the things I always like to say is, like, you have to manage the managers. So I think a lot of this, so whether it's a property manager, or a general contractor or project manager or whatever it is, or even somebody that's on your own team, of like, hey, they still have to be managed. You still have to lead them. So, one of my favorite things, I like to say is, like, to be a good leader, I really think you have to thrive in four areas: communication, motivation, giving feedback, and then positivity. So
Yep.
those four things, and that's something I do with my own team, but that also has to come through with all of my contractors that I'm working with, and all of our third parties, and a title company or a lawyer. All those things is, I have to make sure I'm
So true.
communicating efficiently and effectively in the way and we're communicating on the same level. We have the same, forms that we're doing and everything like that. Also, motivate them. So like you said, of like, sometimes they might work out great for like 3 projects, and all of a sudden, it's getting a little easy, and, oh, Miss is a nice girl,
Mhm.
so maybe I'll kind of, like, it's
Yeah.
like being able to keep them motivated and know what's going on and stuff like that. But then giving feedback too. I'm just like, hey, you know what? I wasn't happy with. It's okay to give harsh feedback as well
Yeah,
as well as like the good feedback and stuff, like, hey, I really wasn't happy with this. Like, if you want to continue working on this, I need you to step up your game. I need you to do a little bit better, and
for
tell them
sure.
why, and provide all that feedback, but then also do that positivity. And I know you do a great job. Like, sometimes you don't see Missy lose her cool too often or anything like that, but sometimes it has to come out. But be able to
Yeah,
keep positive and stuff like that. So it's tough, but like, those are things that we have to do
I love
with
that.
contractors and with all these other people as well. So it's just
It's so true.
yeah.
Most of those things come naturally, except for like the feedback. I'll always give feedback, but I try to be very positive. And I think sometimes, especially if you're managing the project, like you've got to be firm. You've got to set your expectations up front.
Yeah.
That's why a great tip from Pace Morby and his
Mhm.
crew is to take pictures on the property or write things on the walls, put X's on things. This needs to be removed. This needs to go. And then just to make sure that we're all clear, you could write down on a wall, like with a pen or a marker, what needs to be done. And then you can go and videotape again. So there's
Yeah.
different forms of communication to communicate your expectations.
Yeah. Big
Yeah.
old Sharpie, rip this wall out. Like, this is getting,
Take
whatever it
it
is. But
down.
yeah, my
Yes.
our coach Gary Harper, one of the best pieces of advice he ever gave me was like, everybody hears what you're saying, like they hear it the first time, the seventh time you say it.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's like, just because you tell a contractor a thing doesn't mean they're retaining it. And it doesn't mean that they understand it the way you said it or the way that you meant it or all those things.
Yeah.
So going over things in multiple ways too. It doesn't have to be like just you're saying the same thing over and over, but it's like you said, you're going to
Yeah.
write it down. You're going to tell them, you're going to show them in a video, or like, communicating all these different ways and stuff just to get your point across and make sure you guys are both on the same page. That's my
Yeah.
favorite. And then at the end of that stuff too, it's always like making sure they're reiterating it back to me. Okay, what did you hear? What do you have going on? And then like I always like to throw this in there to, okay, can you commit to getting this done in the
Yes.
next week or the next
Yes.
day or two, whatever it is. Always asking for that commitment. I like to use that word and stuff. I think it helps out a lot. But,
Yes. And write it down, get a
yep,
contract. Sometimes you need to do that up front too, just to explain this is what was expected. This was what was not done.
yep,
So yeah, you want to be fair and kind and generous, but we're all in business for a reason, right?
yep, exactly.
So,
So those, the little mistakes, they can over the year, they're going to add up, and they're
oh
going to
yeah.
cost money, and they're going to cost relationships sometimes too. So,
Hmm. For sure.
um, so I know that you have gone through Pace's program, and you have done, just connected with all these people. You got your podcast going on. You connected with great people through that and stuff. So I think you do an amazing job of putting yourself out there and making connections with people in the real estate space. And, whether it's nationwide, whether it's here in Indianapolis and stuff like that. So how are you able to do that? And what tip do you have for people that, so I'm that person. Like I don't like networking. I would much rather do a podcast or be in front of a group of 150 people, like presenting something, than have to walk around and be like, hey, I'm Brian Snyder.
Yeah.
How are you? I can't do that. But I think you do a great job of putting yourself out there, making connections, and just doing that. So what's some tips or what's some advice you have for people that maybe are struggling with that right now, or just also too, like, how important is that to put yourself
Yeah.
out there and to make those connections?
I would just make yourself uncomfortable. When you're uncomfortable is when you grow,
Yeah.
period, point blank. So I used to spend a lot of time this last year listening to a lot of Zooms and watching a lot of recorded things. And it was great. I have all this information, but I'm not taking any action.
Yeah.
And so, one thing, I mean, Brian, you and I had a conversation about this, gosh, maybe last week, is that I need to get back out into the indie market. So, yeah, I've got friends in Phoenix, over in California, folks in Florida, people out in Idaho, Georgia. But I'm like, who am I connecting with a lot
Yeah.
here?
Yeah.
There's a couple of guys that I want to like wrap my arms around,
Yeah.
which is that Omari and Sharon.
There we
Like,
go.
we'll hopefully link up at some point in time, but we text and we go through Messenger a lot. But yeah, there's people in this market that you guys are also key players. Like I love Ronnie. Ronnie's awesome.
Yeah.
So you just got to get to know your market, where your opportunities are, networking with good people that personally have similar values to you, because if your foundation is the same, you're going to likely do business together for a long, long time.
Yeah. What
So,
are do you have what's a good way that you make that initial connection, or how do you prefer, like, reaching out to people and connecting with them? Is it through social media, or is it going to an event, or what's that easiest way for you?
yeah. So a lot of times people just message me on Facebook.
Yeah.
That seems to be like the number one. Or like they'll start getting our deals. They're like, hey, I don't know how I ended up on your list, but hey, thanks for sending this. By the way, do you think you can help me out? And so then we just hop on the phone. I'm like,
So
well, there's a couple of tight knit folks that we have in Indianapolis. So
there you go.
likely got your contact from them, but it all works out. You just have to be genuine, personable. The first time you go to a real estate investment meeting, I mean, everybody had their first time. You're going to be
Yeah.
a little bit nervous. And as a woman, that is a male dominated industry. So you're like, how's this going to go? It's going
So
to go great. There's no
yeah.
other option.
Yeah.
Just think.
And if you want to make a bunch of connections, just go in and say, like, hey, I'm a buyer. Raise your hand and say I'm a buyer, and then
Yeah.
everybody will just connect
They
with you and
won't leave you
talk to
alone.
you. Yeah.
Bring a lot
So
of business cards.
yeah. So it's funny, on the episode I did, but previous to these two with you, Miss, I talked to Vance Courtney, and so Vance brought his wife into his business and is working with her.
Yeah.
Same thing with our team on the Simple team. So I brought my wife into the business, and I'm working with her, and they're both our wives are doing an amazing job. So I have to ask you, when you're working on these projects and stuff like that, you're doing this with your husband. So what are some tips that you have for just working with your spouse, doing projects with them, of like, okay, who's taking the lead on this one? Who is, hey, nope,
Yeah.
this is the decision. You got to run with it. Like, what's some tips or some advice you have for people doing that, of working together?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to candy coat it, but it's hard because you
Yeah.
got to stay in your lane and you need
Mhm.
to know your strength. So, like Ben's strength is Like he's at a property today. He, is the one that can fix most things, but it doesn't mean that that's what he should be doing all the time,
Yep.
right? Even though he can do most things, you need to be delegating that to somebody else so he can thrive in his area. What he loves to do is to look for deals. So he loves to drive around, loves to send me addresses, and then I send it off to our VA. They skip trace it, and I try to call. So,
Yep.
or we send them something. So that's Ben's area. Now he can do pretty much most everything. Like he can do electrical, he can do plumbing, doesn't do drywall, but he does cabinets, trim work, base and case. So he does a lot. But again, it doesn't mean that that's what he should do. For me, I'm really good at, I feel like at least my strong suit is more analyzing, connecting with people. I just opened up to you and said last year I was not thriving in like my strength. I was trying to manage VAs.
Yeah.
I was trying to do too much and our marketing strategies were not working. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get back to what I know is getting on the phone and it's talking to people. It's creating a connection, a relationship, and solving problems. And literally after the first week that I did that, just, maybe a month or two ago to kind of pivot again, that's when deals started coming in. I'm like, it's so rewarding. So know what your strength is, know what your partner's strength is, but respect the space. We have to do date nights. We still don't do that enough.
Yeah.
Because when he comes home, the kids are like, Daddy.
Yeah. And then on those date
I'm
nights,
like,
try not to talk about work too much and business too much and things like that.
Oh my gosh, all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Like as we're having this talk right now, like my phone, I just peeked, like I have a tenant calling, the contractor's texting me. And I just want to be like, hey, Ben, can you call him? Like, so I've had him put out more fires lately, which I think has been really good because he is a firefighter.
He's good about putting out fires. So that's his job.
Yeah.
So awesome.
It makes him a little uncomfortable though. I will say that just because Ben is not like a confrontational. So if I'm like, hey, they're falling short on this project. Hey, can you just call him? Can you ask him where he's at? Can you text him first? I'm like, just do it. Who cares? Yeah. He's such a nice guy.
He is. So let me ask you, real quick here, like what is, as you've been doing this over the last couple of years and stuff like that, what is one mistake that you've made that you've learned from of like, oh man, I'm not going to do this again. Or like really your business has really profited off of that. Maybe that one mistake that you've made that like, hey, we made a difference here and we know how to do this now. We're good to go.
Know your comps.
Yep.
Like that's all I can say. So we bought a property, Hamilton County. It's still a good deal, but I trusted the comps given by, another wholesaler individual, and they were really high. And I trusted because I'm like, I want this property. I want this area. We're going to get it. And then I did our own appraisal and it came in like $35,000 less. I'm like, ooh. So a ton of our savings and equity is sitting there, 30% plus whatever we thought was going to comp out for in that property. So do your own homework, do your own diligence, know the area. Just because a comp says that it's worth 200K, but it looks like, pardon my French, hell inside or whatever, it just looks terrible. You're not going to get it to appraise for 200K with like toilet sinking in and floors that need to be replaced and looks like someone just barfed all over the couch. Like it's not going to happen.
Yeah. So no, that's great advice. And I say that over and over again. I tell people all the time, like, hey, I'm really good at running comps, but don't trust my comps. Don't trust Randy's comps, Alicia's comps. Don't trust Mrs. comps. Like run your own comps, figure out a way to do that. And if you can't do that, like do it in real time. Like, hey, Brian, can you sit down with me and run the comps with me so I can see really what's going on? Don't trust the three best comps that a wholesaler is going to put out on a deal or anything like that. So it's tough.
Be your own advocate because no one else will do it for you. As an investor, be your own advocate. So if you have a spread of comps that's like $40,000 wide, take the middle comp because the bank is going to take the middle or the lower one and then deduct based upon whatever needs to be done, the condition of the property. So that was one big lesson that we learned. But because we're very blessed and lucky to have market appreciation, we're going to be okay, at the end of the day.
Yeah. That's one of the things I wanted to ask you too, was like when you're going into these properties and, you and Ben are out walking a property or whatever, and you're deciding what you're going to do with it, whether it's for a rental or whether you're going to end up flipping or anything, like, how do you figure out like the design style? Because I think you do it. I love your design style. I think you do a great job with this. And that's one of the things I love on your Flip Tip Tuesdays too, of like, what's she going to talk about or what's she going to highlight here and stuff. I love seeing what you come up. I think you do a great job on your design. So how do you figure out, hey, what design style am I going to use? or what's going to look good in this house, or what's going to do. How do you decide on that? Because I think a lot of people don't have that vision, or they struggle
Yeah.
with that a little bit, or it's just like, yep, white and gray, white, paint
Yeah.
everything gray, white trim, like.
That
So
all the houses look the same.
yeah, yeah.
So, I don't try to design for me. You try to design for the masses, but give it like a unique flair. So lately, I love like the really dark cabinets with the brass or the black lights, or just incorporating some sort of a pattern. So, like if you're doing tile work, make sure that one is like a wider scale pattern paired with like a smaller, tiny pattern. So, you have to know kind of what plays off of each other well. You also have to make sure that you identify sight lines. So, when you go into a front door and you're looking at like a beautiful fireplace, like that's clearly a beautiful sight line that you want to accentuate. So how do we want to accentuate that? Do we want to do shiplap? Are we not in an area that would respect shiplap? Is this just too nice? Do we need to do stone? So elevate it. Again, know what your surrounding comps look like, but make it better. And just let's say you or I like red or orange. Don't throw red and orange on a wall. Like it's gotta be generic. It's gotta be neutral. But one thing that we do, because Ben is so talented, is we love design feature walls, or we love,
Mhm.
doing things like that, because it makes a space feel so much nicer, like 5 or 10K more than any other property on the market, but it probably only costs like $1,000 to do,
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah.
with the wood and the paint and the caulking and sanding, all that stuff. So a little bit of creativity and elbow grease will go a long way.
Love it. So how do you choose colors? Because that's like, I think you mentioned a couple of colors before, and like I don't even know what those colors names are, and there's always so many unique color names and things like that. So how do you stay ahead of that? We talked about, like listening to bigger pockets to stay ahead of trends on what's going on in the markets and what's kind of going to go happen in Indianapolis, stuff like that. So how do you stay ahead on trends when it comes to like picking colors and knowing what that next color is going to be? Or use that person like, hey, I'm going to dictate this trend. I'm going to set this. I'm going to set up what's going to happen.
Truth be told, like I want to be that girl. I'm like, what am I going to come up with that's going to be amazing? That's going to be in like everybody's homes.
There you go.
So someday, um, honestly, like if you look at what they're doing on the West Coast and the East Coast, like if you look at what they're doing in Phoenix, like they use a lot of those dark, more modern colors. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I love that. But sooner or later, guess what? It starts to infiltrate into the Midwest. Like we're always slow to adapt. So you can kind of cheat a little bit and see what they're doing.
Yeah.
But when it comes down to a color, that's really hard to describe. Like it's got to be rich. It's got to be like earthy. I like neutrals, but then you just got to pair it with texture. I love texture. Why does the chair behind me work? Like you got texture. Like look,
Yeah.
you got that vibe.
Looks great. Looks
And
great.
how many times do I get like they're like, "Oh, Melissa, is it Christmas?" It's always Christmas. It's always greenery and earthy tones.
There you go. So
You just stick with warm colors, pair warm together, pair cool, but just know when to bend the rules. That's why you need to hire me. I mean,
there you go. So on that note, I know we talked about on the last episode, we talked about your Flip Tip Tuesday. Definitely check that out, and
yep,
definitely follow Melissa on just all the social media. Just follow her on there. She's got the podcast, the Intentional Investor Show. They do an amazing job on there. Really great insights. But I also want to give you a chance to talk about what you're also doing, which is some virtual design services that you have. As we're talking about all this stuff and things like you're the type of person that I need to hire, because I don't know, what color did you say? I don't understand that. What does that look like? Like I don't
yeah,
know that kind of stuff. Like I'm more of the design. Hey, I want it to look like this. You pick the colors for me. But
yeah.
so talk about what you're doing when being able to help some people out, like doing some of this just virtually, like some of these design services and things like that.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. So number one, super laid back and easygoing. So like if you're wearing your PJs and your slippers and you have like nasty dragon breath, like we can do a virtual design appointment. It's gonna be amazing. Like look at Brian right now. He's got nasty dragon breath. This is amazing. um, but all you have to do is just reach out to me on social media and just let me know kind of, hey Melissa, I'm looking to redo my house. I'm looking to remodel this bathroom. Or for the last client I'll use as an example, gosh, she had so many fun questions. She's taken this truly fixer upper and she's trying to pair it with like great colors on the walls and pick which wall she wanted to do like a design feature. How should she rip off the siding on the back of the house and do batten board? And what color should that be? And how big should those boards be? All those little things that you're like, I think I know what I want to do, but the little details matter.
Yeah.
They really end up mattering in the end.
Yep.
From that project, we ended up doing just shiplap next to like the stairway. I posted that picture and I got a couple of just direct messages. Oh my gosh, I love what you guys did. Hey, how big were those boards? Because normally shiplap boards are like 4, 6 inches. Oh no, 4 is really small, 6 inches wide. These were 10 inches wide. So they were big boys, and people are like, I love those.
Yep.
So then the question is, how big is like the end cap, right? So those are little things that go a long way. I like to make the little things in the room the big things in the room. And you don't ever want to notice like one thing over another. It's just all got to work together. And slowly your eye starts to peel away this beautiful like onion of a project, right? And it just all comes together. And I just love it. I love it.
No, and that's what I mean. That's
You.
such a great. That's exactly what it comes down to. Of like, the size of those boards can make a huge difference on what that
Yeah.
looks like, and that's the difference between like somebody like just trying it on their own or getting some some professional help with what they have going on, and somebody that's seen it before and done it before and things like that. So,
Yeah.
amazing stuff. Really appreciate it, Melissa. Thank you so much for joining me today. We got these 2 episodes. Amazing stuff, just amazing insights, amazing tips that you have been able to give and everything. If somebody wants to reach out to you to find out more about what you're doing, or just want to give you some, hey, can you cover this on your next Flip Tip Tuesday, or what's going on here, or reach out to you for some virtual design services, where can they go? How can they connect with you?
Okay, cool. Thanks, Brian. So we have the show, The Intentional Investor Show. You guys can tune into that on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts. On Facebook, it's just Melissa Asbury. It's Melassa Asbury, Asbury. You can also email me if that's more your style. It's just melissa@thebuyinghouse.com. That's melissa@thebuyinghouse.com. Yeah, and I'll always get back to you within like a couple hours as soon as I see it. So unless I get blown up, I'm not giving my cell phone number.
Yeah, don't do that. I did that before on the radio show, and that didn't turn out too well for me. So I got a little busy, but
yeah.
No. So fantastic stuff. Really appreciate you. Really appreciate the insights. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening to the Indy Investor Pod. This is a wrap for this episode, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.